Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you that have been here for a while, I know it has been a little bit and since I have uploaded anything, but I'm back. For those of you guys that are new, my name is Dr. Ray. I'm a small animal general practitioner, and I have this channel where we kind of go over food and different pet products and answer your pet questions, kind of in a lighthearted, fun kind of way, non-judgmental way. And so today, now that I'm kind of getting back in the swing of things, I thought I would start back at the basics and kind of go over with you guys my thought process before I even pick a food off the shelf. And so I'm going to go over with you the 5 things that must be satisfied before I even consider doing one of these deep reviews on a food. So number 1 is going to be availability. And so availability to me means that I can get it pretty easily. And so it's not uncommon. My kids are in charge of feeding the dogs. It's not uncommon that we get to Wednesday night and there's no food in the bin. And so it's very important to me that this food is available, that I can get it in a pinch. And so some people work night shift. You know, maybe you have to have a store that's got hours that are extended so that you can get to it. You know, if you purchase your food at a small boutique type store, maybe they're only open a few days a week. Maybe you order online. You order online and it takes 2-3 days to ship, or maybe the mail is bad in your area and it's not reliable and you can't get that food readily. And so to me, the food needs to be readily available. I need to be able to get it. I don't want to have to change my dog's food. That's not good for their GI tract. It's not good for consistency. Dogs do better when there's a regular routine. And so I don't want to have to pick another dog food because, you know, the store wasn't open or it wasn't readily available. The other thing to consider with availability these days, because of some of the supply shortages, is it a food that keeps going on back order? And so if it's a food that you find that's constantly on back order, it's unavailable, the store shelves are empty, you might want to pick a different food because we really want to keep things consistent. Okay, number 2, that's going to be cost. And so everybody, you know, always assumes that more expensive foods are the better foods. And, you know, going through this channel, I hope that I have elucidated that that's not necessarily the case. And so you can get a really good quality food for a price that's appropriate for you. You know, it doesn't do any good if you really, you know, bust your hump to, you know, buy a pet food, but then when hard times come or, you know, things are a little short, we have to switch foods because we can't, you know, afford the one that we've picked. And so price is important. Pick a price that makes the food available to you readily. And so we're going to do research on these foods and we're going to find a food that's in our price point that's still a good food and that we can budget that in a regular basis. The other thing that kind of goes along with this that can be a little bit tricky is a lot of times I'll put on this channel the price per pound, and price per pound is important. It can help you calculate if you can afford a food. But it's also important to realize cost to feed. And so cost to feed is going to require a little bit of math. It's going to require you to know how many cups you have to feed your pet. Because, for example, let's say you have food A, and food A you have to feed 3 cups to meet your daily caloric requirement for your pet. And then, you know, maybe it's a little bit more expensive of a food. But food B is super, super, super cheap. And, but you have to feed 6 cups of that food. The one may not necessarily be cheap after all once you calculate how much you have to feed. And so this is a common thing, and we can get into pet nutraceuticals. If you guys are interested in that, you can leave a comment below. But it's a really common thing I see in my practice with things like glucosamine chondroitin. And so I always recommend reputable brands because nutraceuticals are not regulated very well, so you want to pick a reputable brand. And so I'll recommend something like Cosequin or a brand like that. And people will come back and say, you know, the Cosequin was really expensive and I found, you know, this product at whatever store, Sam's or Walmart, it's a lot cheaper. But as we go through the ingredients and we look at the concentrations, where, you know, you may be giving 1 Cosequin tablet per day, you end up having to give like 20 tablets of this other more cheap, glucosamine. And so when you're calculating cost, it's important to not only calculate the cost per pound, or with the Cosequin example, cost per pill, but the cost per feed, or the cost per appropriate dose. So cost, that can be a touchy subject, but it really is important to make sure you're picking something that you feel comfortable with in your budget, that you can afford and you can do on a regular basis. All right, number 3, and I know this is a little bit of a controversial topic, is if a food says on a package, for me, grain-free or raw, that's a deal breaker. And I have a lot of videos posted about this. This is my truth. Personally, with my degree in animal science biology and my doctoral veterinary degree, and talking with cardiologists and internists and, nutritionists on a regular basis, for me, if it's grain-free or raw, that's a hard pass. All right, no more of that one. I know that one's a little bit inflammatory, so we're just going to move on. Okay, so number 3 is going to be the guaranteed analysis. And so the guaranteed analysis on the package is going to be the minimum and the maximum of some key nutrient ingredients. And those are really, available on the package. They are required to be on the package. And so you can find them online and you can find them in the store. And the important thing on the guaranteed analysis is I want that to be on point with the standards that are defined in the literature. And so we have tons of videos on this channel where we go over what is the appropriate guaranteed analysis for multiple of the life stages. So is it appropriate for adult? Is it appropriate for a puppy? Is it appropriate for a large breed puppy? And, pregnant and lactating, all that. So I want the guaranteed analysis to fall on point. I don't want a company to get creative with a guaranteed analysis. These are things that are established. We know that they're true. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I want it to be on point. Okay, so number 5 is the nutrition adequacy statement. That's often called the AFCO statement. You'll see it abbreviated like that. And that's one of the most important, in my opinion, parts of the package. And it's usually really small, really tiny, hidden somewhere, because pet food companies don't think it's that important. But it is, because it's one of the most real, unmanipulated, can't be manipulated because it has legal requirements and legal definitions, and we can glean a lot of important information there. And so this is where you're going to have your life stage listed. And so if a food, for me, is for all life stages, that's usually an indication that I might want to look somewhere else. The reason being is all life stages means that it is made specifically for the most rigorous life stage. And so you can't call something all life stages, but it not encompass the hardest life stage to feed. And that's going to be pregnant and lactating and puppies. They need a lot of energy. They need a lot of nutrients to perform and allow growth and feeding and things like that. And so all life stages isn't, in my opinion, really appropriate for all life stages. If you have an adult dog that's not very active and you feed it an all life stage food, you're going to have problems with obesity because there's just too many calories there. And yeah, you can technically feed it to an adult, but it's not ideal. And so I don't like all life stages. I think that's a cop-out for a brand. I think it's an easy way for a brand to make one food basically and then say, look, we can feed all dogs with it. We can feed all cats with it, because they'll do this with cats too. And so I want to see a food that is made specifically for my pet's life stage. And so if I have an adult, I want it to say adult. If I have a puppy, I want it to say puppy. If I have a pregnant or lactating dog, great. I can go ahead and feed it an all life stage and I don't have an issue with that. But let's just try to keep it really specific for our pet's specific life stage. The other thing you'll find here is information about if the pet food was formulated or underwent feeding trials. Now, this isn't a deal breaker for me, but I do like to see foods that are ideally feeding trialed. And so what that means is they've taken the food, they fed it to dogs or cats, and they see if the food actually performs as they've promised. And so this takes time and money. And so companies that do this are putting, in my opinion, a little bit of extra into the processing of the food. They're taking the extra step to do that. And so that to me is a good indicator. Foods that are formulated means they've just taken somebody else's recipe or they followed the national guidelines recipe. but they don't know if the food's actually performing the way that they claim that it's performing. And so I like to see a food that's feeding child, but again, not a deal breaker. It just shows me they put a little bit extra effort into that. Now, when we say feeding child, a lot of companies will say they don't do feeding trials because they don't do animal testing. Let's be honest, feeding a dog food is not animal testing. That's just another way that a company is trying to cop out and say, they use an easy formula rather than actually taking the time and effort into feeding a pet food. So again, if a company tells me they don't do feeding trials because they don't perform animal testing, that's a little suspect to me. All right, so there you have it, my 5 tips or 5 things that I actually look for before I even take the food off the shelf or before I go into some of these in-depth analysis on a food. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you to everybody that came back to the channel that's already subscribed. But if you haven't subscribed and you'd like to join us for more of these food reviews, please hit the subscribe button. Lets me know that you enjoy the content and lets me know you want me to film more videos. All right, guys, until next time, bye.